What an incredible Cinderella story. This group of unknowns have come out of nowhere to start a podcast here in Holly. And it's called the 1MC, Holly's very own One Main Circuit. It's a public address circuit, and it's for everyone. The 1MC hosted by Holly's very own Hewlett Bravender V.F.W. Post 5587 in partnership with Holly's American Legion Post, number 149er. That's right, folks, you heard a niner. We're rocking it with a veteran vibe here. So a special shout out to the Al Schwartz Post. We're recording from here today. May the Schwartz be with you. Now you may be asking yourself, why a podcast? Well, so are we. To quote the immortal words of the Cranberries, everybody else is doing it, so why can't we? Our goal with this is to create another forum for public discussion and debate. It's also a mechanism for outreach for any civic group within our community that has a message to share. We're here for you. So here it is, the 1MC, Holly's very own community podcast. If you'd like to get involved, or if you have any questions or comments, reach out to us direct at 1mc@vfw5587.org. That's the number 1, the letters MC at vfw5587.org. We're looking forward to hearing from you. Today we're broadcasting from our very own secret speakeasy-like bar hidden away in the American Legion. You may not have heard about it. We affectionately refer to it as the Bunker, a veteran oasis and the land of no last call. Just watch your head coming down those stairs. With us today, we've got yours truly, Rodney Paddock, a local veteran, active member of the V.F.W. and American Legion here in Holly, also a proud Moose member and involved with a number of civic groups in the community as well. To my left, I have...
Hi, this is April Brandon. I'm the president of the Holly Township Library Board, and thanks for having me here today, Rodney. And to my left...
Hi, Jerry Narsh, Holly Police Chief, and glad to be here today.
And I'm Steve McGee, Fire Chief and Building Official. Glad to be here. Thanks.
And rounding out, I'm Jim Koskela, local citizen, business owner, and veteran.
Well, April, Jim, always great to have you guys here. Steve, Jerry, always a pleasure as well. It's great to see you guys without code running, lights and sirens. So today, among other things, we're going to be talking about the Police Fire Public Safety Operations Special Assessment. So let's get things started. Anyone have anything they want to kick off with? Any questions to hit these guys? They're in the hot seat.
Now, April and I did talk about this beforehand, and she's got a killer list here of stuff we're going to talk about from Facebook. So, April?
Well, first I'd like to open with a comment that Ryan Delaney, one of our village councilmen, made as he was addressing some questions on Facebook. He said the village consultants, Plant Moran, are projecting a budget shortfall over the next few years due to the Headley Amendment, which is limiting every municipality's ability to raise revenues through property taxes, which is the village's main revenue source. Police and fire are 70% of the budget. That's what they're asking for in this assessment. Do you find this to be accurate? And can you flesh out what that means for us a little bit further?
The 70% accuracy, is that what you're looking for?
Yeah.
And everybody, for me, and I know there's some experience at the table here with Chief McGee as well. I think it's been 41 years I've been in law enforcement, the last 21 years as a chief. And what you find is in administration, you realize certain things. That budgets are difficult in any municipality, but the largest portion of any municipal, whether it's city, village, township, county, state, federal, is always going to be the protection of its citizens. That is the first duty of government, and that follows from federal down to local. And as a result of that, police and fire operations are always the largest chunk of the pie.
And in the village, we have a general fund. Many municipalities have millages, special millages for fire and maybe police. Here we have, like Chief Narsh mentioned, one pot of money basically to pull from. So you've heard mentioned sidewalks and police and fire and even writing checks for salaries. It all comes out of the same pot. And so that's the hard part. And with, as you mentioned, April, the Headley Amendment, rolling that back over time, we get less and less. So the piece of pie is getting smaller.
Now, with that, it's my understanding, too, if property values go up then, hopefully then taxable value would go up, and then it may counteract the Headley Amendment a little bit?
Well, not really. Part of that problem is the inflation really, it's set for inflation. So while property values may go up, they're capped. And so it really we're about break even. And if you look back over time, police and fire in this case, we're about the same budgets we had 10 or 15 years ago.
And how that caps it is, for most folks, they're going to look at it and say, well, the last couple of years, the housing industry has taken off. So the values, the assessed values of homes and properties are going up. And a classic example of all the size of the budget of the Village of Holly for the general fund, it's my understanding that the increase in capture is only $25,000 this year.
Not much.
Not much. So that includes, now that budget also includes the DPW, Department of Public Works, the water plant. Everything that village government does comes out of one piece of pie. So this year, with even all of those increases in property values, $25,000 is it for an increase in capture for the Village of Holly. So it shows how it's good if you're a property owner, right? Your taxes don't go up, but we're like anybody else. We're affected by inflation and we're capped. So when we set a budget, we're fixed to that budget for the next year. So if in the process something big happens and we have an urgent need, they literally have to do a budget adjustment and go in to adjust our individual budgets because it wasn't budgeted. So we are by law forced to live to fiscal responsibility within our individual budgets.
Well, and then to build on that a little bit, again, there's only a limited amount of monies. So we've had to be creative in ways to make that money go farther. So I'm the only full-time person at the fire department. Everybody else is full-time someplace else. And so they work on their days off and they will come here and do that. Chief Narsh has the same situation. He has, I'm not sure how many, 9 maybe full-time people, but that covers 24/7 with 2 people. Right. And so he utilizes reserves and part paid people as well. And really we cannot get any cheaper than we are. We've tried.
Mm-hmm.
If the assessment passes, how much of the general fund will be rerouted and what will the freed up money be spent on, if that's something that you're privy to?
Well, yeah. And, I just kind of want to start out with this, and I know Chief McGee and I have talked about this, but one of the things that has been, I think, the most important to me, more than the patch on my shoulder, the badge on my chest, is in 40 years of law enforcement, I have tried my best to create an environment of complete clarity, honesty, and truthfulness with defendants, attorneys, people within the municipal government, my staff, and everybody we come across. So for us to talk about these things, we're actually glad to talk about it because we want people to understand what the actual chiefs who are involved in these budgets, but we also would never sacrifice, personally, I would never sacrifice any clarity or honesty for a little bump in budget. It's not worth it to me. It's not worth it to Steve. It's not worth it to any of us. So what we're sharing with you is what we know and what we are going to kind of hold that this will be the case. So it's my understanding that this would raise in excess of around $340,000.
And what does that mean to your guys' budget, $340,000?
Well, that's where it depends, right? So if in that first year, I know the chief will talk about some of his equipment needs. Our police cars run 24/7. So they get worn out at a higher, faster pace in that use, and they're very expensive. It's not just the car, it's all of that equipment. And a lot of this equipment that we use, keep in mind, is mandated by both federal and state law, and those changes are increasing. So the burdens of equipment and training on us are increasing.
Yeah, the unfunded mandates are huge, and so we need to keep our personnel at a certain level, and every year it goes up a little bit, which it should, but there's no increased funding for that, so we have to find that money in other ways. For the fire department, I would see the biggest change would be equipment. Some of our equipment, our ladder truck is 34 years old. We have 2 engines. One of them is 23 years old. The other one is 19 years old.
Now, Chief, is 34 years. I'm a layperson.
That's a long time.
That's a long time.
So, and so really, typically, most fire departments try to replace equipment at 15 or 20 years at the most. We pushed it farther. We think 25 years is totally doable. Mm-hmm. We don't run 24/7 like the police cars do, and but it still needs to run when you turn it on. So our ladder truck is an example right now, is in the shop, and they can't find parts for it. For certain parts of it, because it is 34 years
Is
old.
that due? Oh, it's due to the age of the
Due
vehicle
to the
itself.
age. They just quit making parts, and so and back to the fire department, we really don't buy new equipment. We buy, I hate to say secondhand, but 15-year-old equipment.
Well, I'm from the Marines. I know what that is.
So you get that. So, but the plan, and we had an '88 engine that we got rid of about 2 years ago now, and we just couldn't. There was no parts. We couldn't get it. So instead we bought a '99, which is still pretty old.
Yeah.
But it was a lot newer, and we could get parts and keep it in service. But we bought that for $20,000 instead of $300,000 or $400,000.
Now the village only has one ladder truck.
One ladder truck.
Ladder truck.
Let's hit on some of the basics real quick. What areas are served by each of these departments?
The village of Holly.
Correct. And both of us provide mutual aid to many departments around and townships for the police department.
Okay, and it's important to note that the village of Holly does not include the township of Holly.
That is correct.
And it's really important to know, because I think there are 9 different communities that have a Holly mailing address. So we get calls, our public service agents get calls all day long. I listen to them, I can hear them from my desk. And where do you live in Holly? What is your address? And the majority of the people calling think that we're their police department because they live in Holly, but they're actually in Springfield. That's covered by the Oakland County Sheriff's Office. So they're in Holly Township, Rose Township, or Groveland. That's the Michigan State Police by default. They don't have a police agency, so the Michigan State Police actually patrol that because there is no police service. Those residents don't pay an additional cost for that because the Michigan State Police exists. However, our residents pay for the Village of Holly Police Department. And on top of that, we have no police authority unless we're requested by the Michigan State Police or another police agency to take a call in their agency, or in their jurisdiction.
Outside of the village.
Outside of the Village of Holly, the incorporated boundaries. So we do this all the time because we're requested if they don't have units available. And that happens often enough where we are asked to make those requests, but we cannot make that from a citizen who calls and says, well, we want you guys to come because it's going to be easier for us if you come. We can't do that. We have no police authority unless we're granted by the agency whose jurisdiction we are going to.
Offbeat curiosity here, being new to the area still, dispatch for law enforcement, since there are multiple agencies that are involved. If I call 911, where does that call go to? I'm assuming that's routed to the county?
It's routed to the county. They try to set up off the face of the towers as to which area that tower is going to ping. And if the majority of that area is the Michigan State Police, it'll go to the state police. But of course, there are sections where it's going to go to the sheriff's office. And when they determine that they're at Holly Township, Rose Township, or Groveland, then they transfer that call down to the Michigan State Police Dispatch Center.
Now, dispatch, great question there. Previously, I thought I had heard something along the lines of there was a millage in the past trying to keep dispatch here in the village. Was that correct? Was there a vote that was taking place previously to keep dispatch here in the village?
Yeah, that was probably, I think that was a 5-year millage specifically for maintaining 911 service. So just a brief tour on 911. I was a part of that debate in a statewide. I also, at a previous department, ran a 911 center. Had that from 1984, the inception of, until around 2012. And I think this was around about the same time in Holly. So at that time, there were about 191 911 centers across the state of Michigan. The governor put together around that time a committee, the 911 committee, and they had determined that they wanted to narrow that down because most of those funds came from state sources. The 911 committee, and through surcharges on your phone, you have that 911 tax and other things. But those funds, they wanted to narrow that down and create more mega dispatch centers. So they put pressure on the individual departments, both the Village of Holly and the previous agency I was at. We received letters that stated, if you want to maintain a 911 center going forward, you're going to have to pay for all of the costs out of your own budget, and we are going to set the equipment standards. So we might contact you and say, you're going to need this new phase 2 911 capability, and that's going to cost you $1 million. So most communities our size couldn't afford that. So at that time, the 911 was then, most of us went to the larger, the county agencies.
So that
for
directly
dispatch
led to
services.
us trying to figure out who to call for 911.
Well, you don't have to know. You just dial, 911,
911.
and
Okay.
the intrinsics of that are all built in. But since that time, and that was the reason. There was no, really, the smaller departments couldn't afford to continue with a 911 center. We get good 911 service, and our dispatching service is much less, and we'd much rather now, based on those costs, put that money into feet on the street. So if you had a choice between having your own 911 center or having 3 additional officers on duty,
I got
yeah.
Which taxpayers will be affected by the assessment if it passes?
That'll just be village residents in the businesses and within the village limits.
And on average, each household will be about $150 annually.
Well, you know, this came about so quickly. We had planned, and maybe this is a great time to jump into that.
We were going to get to it. Don't worry.
Okay.
That was one of the items we wanted to talk about too.
Okay, yeah, because we were not ready for this next week election. That was not our plan whatsoever. We had, you know, we wanted to do it and take our time and make sure the public was well informed. And through some other things that I think you know about and will ask about, it was dumped on us literally Friday of this last week. So 4 days ago, we learned of this. And,
Surprise.
Yeah, and we have 7 to go.
We actually just started with a committee of people to sit down and talk about how can we best convey the need and the message in an honest and thoughtful manner, taking our time and reaching as many segments and stakeholders in the community as we could. And 3 days after that meeting, thinking we have until November, one of the committee members actually texted me as well and said, "Hey, I just got my absentee ballot, you're on it." All of the communications that were sent to the Election Commission said November. So somewhere along the line, somebody made an error, and
I think one of the concerns we
We're on
read
the
about
ballot.
on social media here was it was dumped on purpose. But I don't think it sounds like this helps.
this no,
was not.
This is not what you wanted.
people.
It's
If
not.
you listen,
Let's back up a step here.
Yeah.
For the listeners that don't know what's going on, this assessment was supposed to be on the November ballot.
Correct.
And now
Yeah.
instead it's going to be on the August 2nd ballot. And that is a question on here about, I'd like to give you guys the opportunity to address the rumor that the assessment was intentionally jumped to August. How would that benefit or harm the assessment being passed for each of your departments?
well, you know, I'm going to jump on that because, again, I started this by saying more than important to me and my badge and my patch of where I am is who I am. And I'm just saying that with all my soul and heart, that is the worst thing that could happen to us. And this was an absolute surprise. Everybody in the administration was scrambling when we found this out. It was a surprise to all of us. It shouldn't have been. I know the village is still trying to figure out who and how that happened, because this does not give us time to prepare. We are harmed by this. It does not help us. There is no way in anything in my career, and I know that Chief McGee as well, that we would ever try to slide by or disguise anything this important and anything this, you know, it's big to everybody. Nobody wants to come to somebody, knock on the door and say, "Hey, we want to increase your taxes." But everybody at the same time understands we're all hit by inflation. We're capped by Headley. And if we want to maintain with these financial reports that we're reviewing as well from Plant Moranin, that in the next few years we may have to cut staffing. And for me in the police department, I'm already at a negative staffing level. And to cut staffing will cut services. It will cut response time, and it will cut safety. And for me, that's just not acceptable to have less safety and less ability to provide that safety.
And that's 100% true. Same for the fire department. And we already have old equipment, and you know, we're trying to limit how many people we have on duty at a time, and the rate of pay they're paid, and all those sort of things. The first thing that came out of all of our mouth was, how do we get this pushed back to November? We don't want it this quick. And because it already had come out on the absentee ballots, people had seen it and already voted. There was no option. And so we did not want this. And if there was a way that we could kick it to November, I know 2 people right in this room would love that to happen, because we want more of this. We want the public informed. We don't want any, we want transparency. We see that all the time. And we expect it in our troops, and we expect to be the same with the village and all the residents. So, that's, it couldn't be further from the truth. Honestly, we're scrambling right now.
Another factor of concern for some of the public, they're wondering what employees or positions have been given raises from your budget, if any, over the last 4 years, and how much was the increase?
Yeah, let me jump in on that. So there is a level of service. Let's go across Oakland County. We'll use Oakland County as a standard. There's about 47 police agencies throughout the county, and local law enforcement agencies. And the village of Holly, and I'm not saying this in a negative way, the officers are paid and paid pretty well, but we're on the lowest end of the spectrum. So, but these officers work here because they love their community, they've been here, and they love this town, they love this department. But they're on the low end of the pay scale. The raises usually are set by that pie, right? Chief McGee had mentioned that it's one giant budget. So when we look at all of the costs, what's left is what can we do for personnel. The averages across the state, there are some departments doing 10 and 15% raises because, quite frankly, this is now a field that nobody wants to go into. I've in my 40 years, in my 27 years in police administration, I've never seen anything like this in my life, that there is no one going into the law enforcement career, and every police department struggling to get personnel. But the average raises are about 3% per year, and that's if you go across any police agency, not just in Oakland County, in Michigan, across the country. Those are about the average raises, and usually they try to keep up with inflation, but certainly everybody knows this year it's not.
And for us, we have, like I said before, we have part-time personnel, and recently the paramedic firefighters got an increase because there was nobody to work. And so I'm happy to say that that's helping a little bit, since I was working, 2 or 3 shifts a week on, working a 24-hour shift, working on the ambulance or the fire truck. And so I really couldn't do my chief jobs because I was doing 2. And so that's helped us a little bit. Again, we're not going to have full-time personnel anytime in the near future. We can make it work this way, and it's much cheaper. There's no pensions, there's no health care, there's none of those other, things that, double sometimes
Legacy expenses.
A budget. Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
were there any unexpected expenses over the last couple of years on your budget?
not really. We're really tight on that, and between our bosses, they watch us very closely, and if we need something, it has to be justified, and then it may come down to, is this a year to get an ambulance, or is this a year to get a few cop cars? And we have to take turns.
I was so surprised of the cost of the actual equipment. I was at one of the council meetings, and you were doing a presentation, Chief, on I think it's the life packs or of something of those natures.
AEDs or
The Lucas device.
I think it was one of the ones you were looking at buying. It was a refurbished device that was all the EMS carries.
Okay.
It was like $20,000 or $10,000 for this little box, and I was like,
and that was, I hate to say used, but refurbished. So an actual unit would have been almost twice that. So anything that we can buy cheaper that is still guaranteed and will do the job, we go to.
And to answer that question from the police department, so I arrived here on December 9th, 2019. And when I did arrive, the first thing that a normal police chief would come in is do complete audits throughout the department, from operations to performance to equipment to everything, budget. And when I arrived, I had discovered that there just hasn't been, previous to that, and I'm not bashing anybody, it's just when I walked in the door, I had a phone system that didn't work. For the first 30 days I was here, if you called the chief and left a message, I couldn't answer the phone. It was from like the early 90s or late 80s, the phone system. Our computer systems were no longer compatible with our it's called Clemis operating system. Clemis is the consortium. It's our CAD dispatch. That's the computers in the cars. That's how cars are dispatched to calls, and we communicate is by CAD dispatch. And also all of our police report writing and the investigative computers. Everybody throughout Oakland County, and now actually I think up to 7 counties use the Clemis platform for all of their police administrative and operations, from report writing procedures to investigative, all of that. Our computer systems throughout the entire building were end of life, and they weren't compatible with Clemis. I think we were probably one of the only agencies that at that point. So I'm calling my bosses saying, I need a new phone system right now. I need 11 new computers right now. Several of the patrol cars were old. We had to order 3 cars right away. I'm still running with 2016 cars. And 2016 cars that run 24/7, you can imagine the condition of a lot of these cars. And as the high-tech equipment that's in those cars, as that fails, we have to either fix that and replace that. And again, we've got a budget for that. So I've been in a rebuilding stage of equipment. Our less than lethal force that everybody wants us to have and maintain, our tasers. And that's something very important that we have. Ours are about 11 years old. They're end of life. So we're in the process of replacing those. And there's so many of these pieces of equipment that are extremely expensive that we're in the process of rebuilding and restoring. They were just outdated. So not only are those costs there, but you have the constant day-to-day cost of the operations of the department. So those special equipment purchases, these are the kind of things that this kind of relief allows us to do, is get caught up and most importantly maintain staffing. That frightens me as a department head and someone in law enforcement, and I know the chief as well, is if we look at budget projections, because we don't just budget for next year. When we do a 22-23 budget, that's the operational budget we're presenting for adoption, but we're budgeting out 3 years. What are those projections? What is all that going to look like? So we know, because if I can't buy a car this year, I got to buy it next year, but is next year going to be worse than this year? So we do a 3-year projection, and when we're basing that on these estimates that with the Headley cap and the other factors in inflation are taking us down, we don't want staffing to be the next cut, because that's the most dangerous thing if there's not sufficient manpower or officers or firefighters.
So when you came on, your technology was basically equivalent to dial-up internet and rotary phones.
Well, it wasn't that bad. I don't want to make it sound that bad, but at that time it hadn't been maintained in a way. What I like to do is take a 5-year plan on capital improvement and then look at what are the needs over the next 5 years, how are we going to budget for that, what things are going to be end of life. I've got 2 different operating systems that surprised me. I wasn't aware that they were end of life, so we're in the process of replacing those. And these are critical infrastructure for our in-car camera systems. And again, that is a big thing. We want, for clarity and for honesty, I want everything we do recorded and put that out there. We've got those camera systems. Well, the computer that holds all of those videos, the massive terabyte computers, ours is 17 years old. And I just got a phone call the other day that said they can't update it remotely anymore with technology, so I got to replace that. And of course, it's not cheap. So they are things that everybody does, but what we're doing now and what we have been doing is looking at and budgeting so we don't get surprised again.
There's rumors that the new dispensaries will be funding fire and police. Any truth to that? And if so, what kind of funding?
Well, not really. And we've reviewed those as well, even as recently as today. And so we went through that and looked at the what will they be bringing to the table. There will be an increase in tax revenue from the property tax. So that'll be a little bit, but it's not going to be a huge amount. I don't know those numbers. I don't know that any of us do yet. And they pay $5,000 a year for the license fees. So not a lot of money, but as Chief Narsh mentioned, we went up $20,000 or $25,000 this year in revenue. So that takes us up another 10, which is to the plus, to be said. But I don't know that is really the intention of those. I think community-wide, there's a lot of other reasons that it was decided upon, and the council made the choice that they did as far as to bring it in. and good. And I was against it myself, and I know we're kind of in the rough here, but when I listened to everything that everybody had to say, it made sense.
Sure.
And but I don't know that it's really going to help our budget at all.
And so actually the figures are, and this is, I've kind of followed this, but, and again, it depends on the license. So if there are 2 licenses issued in the village, I think the return back is anywhere between 25 and 40,000 a year. What the state does is they charge additional taxes on those sales. That goes into a state collected fund. Then that fund is dispersed back equally to all of the licenses across the state. So depending on the number of licenses and the number of dollars captured, that amount can change, but it's been in the 25 to 40,000 bracket. So even at the best estimate, you would look at another $80,000 per year, but that would again be spread out through all of the divisions and all of the departments, and it doesn't really even keep up with inflation for costs.
And the other hard part with that is there's so many of those going in now. The divisor's getting bigger, so that number keeps going down because whatever's in the pot gets divided by that number. And so at the best it could be that, but it's tough to count on.
Nobody planned on that being the salvation of budget for law enforcement, for fire, for parks, for streets or sidewalks. It's a business that has a right to come, and in this case they came.
It's also a little volatile right now, and none of that money can be counted on, knowing that some of these businesses can pull out of a community at any minute, essentially. There's no obligation in that regard.
There isn't.
Well, and I don't think that anybody expects any of these places to open up tomorrow either. So another rumor that was posed is that each entity that applied, was that 14 or 17 places that
17.
applied? 17 places that applied had to pay $5,000 apiece, and people are wondering where those funds went. So was that just into the general fund?
Yes.
Back
Okay.
to the general fund.
Everything always goes to the general fund. So if you pay a speeding ticket, it doesn't go to the police department.
Or
It
an
goes to the
ambulance-
general fund.
Or an ambulance transport, same thing.
And you should always get speeding tickets because the library gets some of that. So,
Yes, they do, and a lot of people don't realize.
So, speaking of all budgets in general, a resident asked a very pointed question. How can we as the public know that the moved funds will get there and not pay for another cruiser, etc.? So first, would funding a new cruiser fall within the spirit of the assessment's justification? And second, I think what they're really trying to ask is, how can the public verify spending? Do they have access to the approved budgets, and then can they compare it to the approved purchases?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, everything is public. I hate to say it, but you can go on and find my salary and his and everything I've made in my entire life. It's all public. Government budgets and spending is public, and anybody at any time can get copies of those budgets going back. And that's all a part of the clarity. And to the question about the cruiser, the police department, clearly I think we just talked about the equipment needs. I'm still in the hole. And we're trying to build us into not having maintenance and repair costs, as opposed to having the proper and safer equipment, not only for the officers but for the public as well. So the equipment is a part of it, but our big scare and our big threat, and what concerns me most, is staffing levels going forward. And if we don't start now, we will and potentially be in trouble overstaffing.
So, I mean, it's my understanding too, the way it would work is we have to decide. We have the general fund budget. We have to decide, do we want the parks or do we want police, for instance? Would the millage help resolve that then?
Well, it gives you flexibility, right? So, I don't think anybody's going to say, okay, we've got to have our base. And really, I think what we are providing, I'm confident of it, my analysis and audit of what we do, is that we're providing the minimum of service needed for our community. There's no slush here. Trust me. There's no slush. So we're providing that minimum of services of 24-hour operations. But this money will increase and offset and ensure that we will not lose these. The staffing levels that we have, the purchase of equipment going forward that we need. We now know that in year 2, I'm going to need 4 more. I've got 3 or 4 2016 cruisers that were end of life last year, a year and a half ago. So we're going to have to replace those. That's an exceptional cost. So if that's going to be next year, that funding is there. So it is for a cruiser, but not an extra cruiser because we want to have another car. We are limited. When we present our budget, not only the manager, who is a former police chief, by the way, so I can't sneak anything by. He'll catch me. But he's a former police chief, but our council looks at every single line item of our budget. And they look at that. Is it an increase? Is it a decrease? Does it stay the same? If it's an increase, why? And that has to be justified. So you have all of these checks and balances both at budget time, and those are public. Anyone can attend those budget meetings. They're published in advance. And I encourage the people to come out because I want them to hear my presentation. I want them to hear where we are and why I need these things, because you know what? Then people aren't going to write something on a social media page. And if they do have a question, 248-634-8221 or jnarsh@hollypolice.com. I will answer everybody's calls, everybody's emails.
And we know you've got a good phone system now, Chief, so we're counting on it.
Actually, I bought a used one and I found out it's dying, but I got it for a good price.
Is there anything planned to include the township in police protection? I know it's been talked about before as a means to reduce some of the responsibility on the village taxes.
Well, let me rephrase that question. There's not a responsibility on village taxes for responding to the township, okay? But what happens is there is a reality of if the state police is contacted and they have the entire state of Michigan. So their troopers, they maintain, it's called a detachment on Dixie Highway at Groveland. And that detachment is not a operational post. In other words, there's no telephones. You can't call the detachment. You can't knock on a door and have a trooper come out and talk to you.
I knocked on the door once. The trooper came out and talked to me.
Well, you're lucky.
Yeah, there was one there. I saw the car was parked outside. Not always the case.
So that can happen. They do use that for interviews. They use it for their report writing, the needs of the officers and staff. But that detachment is staffed as best as possible. But this is a relationship that's not paid for by any other taxpayer. So if the troopers are tied up and they get called to something big in another area, we get called quite often. And sometimes we call them if we're backed up, and if they can respond, they do, and quite often, and we back each other up. But there is no burden, I would say, over expenditure burden on the police department by responding to those calls. They are increasing because there are more and more people moving to what I call the Northwest Territories. Hey, it's beautiful up here. People are realizing this is the place to be, and they're moving up here. But they're moving from cities and townships and communities where they had a police department and they paid police and fire budgets. So when they get here and they find out they don't have a police millage, they're not paying for police service, but at the same time, they don't. You'd have to either go to the detachment, wait for a trooper to come if you want to talk to a trooper, or go to the Metro North Post in Oak Park. So I don't. That is a determination and a decision by the people of Holly Township. But I know that would be a conversation that could be had. And if those services were spread out across the township, now you've got more people paying into that fund. It would increase the number of patrol vehicles on the road for both communities, but it would never at any time decrease the dedicated number of vehicles for each community. So the Village of Holly, if there was an arrangement in the future where the township said, hey, we'd like to enter into an agreement for police services, we would never at any time reduce what our staffing and our responsibility is for the Village of Holly. It would have to be in addition to cover those areas.
Thank you. Jim, do you have any further questions on the assessment? Because after this, for me, I'll be looking at a couple things I wanted to mention to the chiefs about upcoming events.
I don't have anything. Do the Chiefs want to mention anything about the millage?
I think I've covered everything. It would just help us replace our old equipment and make sure we can, maintain at least a minimum service going forward.
And to quell any misconceptions, there's no margarita machines, no MRAPs involved in any of this or anything crazy?
Let me put it out there. I'm going to invite everybody in the Village of Holly to come see my police department. Come in, and I'm there Monday through Thursday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and I would be happy to take you on the tour. I've got, I think, 1985 carpet. We painted the building in December. A few months after I was there, it was the first time in 20 years, just to get a coat of paint. We have a lot of things, building infrastructure that, plumbing issues, things that we need to fix. If they want to come take a look, my chair followed me. I brought it from my last position. It's kind of torn up, but it's comfy. There is not opulence. There is not. I'm kind of, some would challenge me, but I'm a fiscal conservative on other people's money, and we'll reuse paper clips, and we're going to get the maximum life out of everything we have, because again, we would rather keep as many people on the street providing. That is our core. That's in our heart. And that's in our soul. That's on me. That's on Steve. And I say Steve as a friend, but we're providing something that saves lives. And if we don't have that, that bothers us. This is our life. So come visit me. I'd like to take you on a tour.
Okay. And speaking of local services, what do we need to know about the aftermath of the fires? What's going on, and what can we expect in the future in Battle Alley?
So everything's moving along at a great pace. This Thursday, there'll be 9 insurance companies there with backhoe digging to try to determine the cause of the fire. I'm sure they're not going to find that. It was as everyone knows from social media, in the back of the arcade building, the antique, along Alley Street. And then it spread immediately towards the front and then up and around. We've heard it said that it'll be 2 years. I don't think it's going to take that long. People are already in motion. Once this, and I say 9 fire investigators, there's 9 insurance companies that have that represent different buildings in that area. And if somebody has a melted awning, they don't want their insurance company to pay for it. They want whoever caused the fire to take care of that. So they're all digging, hoping that it's going to be one person and not any of their own. So that'll be, I'm sure, resolved very quickly, within a couple of weeks, I would think. And you can see several of the buildings, the Moose, Andy's Place, Creative Fashions have already started, and even across the street. So I'm hoping for a year, and I think everybody will pull it off. And there's so much community support here, with all these events coming up, and just this town.
Now you mentioned a year. Is that a year to start rebuilding? A year for?
Oh no, I think there'll be between a year and 2 years, depending on who does what. Mm-hmm. I think people will be in, and it'll be like the good old days. I'm that guy, right?
The biggest smile on his face right now.
Well, and again, the fun part for me is I'm the building official too. So we don't do red tape here. We want to we follow the rules because the state guides us with that, but we don't hold anything up, and we'll make sure that we fast track wherever we can legally, and keep everybody moving.
I would agree. That'd be great to see those doors open soon. I know the other night we were in Battle Alley, and a wedding moved from the chapel to the vault, and people were milling about in the street looking for somewhere to drink. They'd ordinarily go to Blackthorn or Andy's. Holly Hotel or Moose, they're all closed, all of them. And I was like, well, maybe Bittersweet will be open for a night shift or something. Hint, Bittersweet owners.
Here's a rare moment. So we tease each other all the time, right? Police and fire jokes, but it's one brotherhood and one community. I constantly say this, and I know he's getting tired of hearing it, but I can't praise Chief McGee and his staff enough. The fact that we're talking about 3 businesses burned, one completely, one partially, and one more water damage. And water damage, smoke to other buildings, and some electrical damage as a result of the grid melting down on that hot day. But the fact that the majority of our downtown is still standing is a testament to Chief McGee, the Holly Fire Department, and 19 neighbors that came and showed up. So those guys are the heroes. That town should have burned. There should have been much, much more. I went through this as a police chief in 2004. I lost a big portion of a historic town in a fire very similar to this, and I was amazed when I stood back as a as a department head and as a public safety professional at the artistry in which they saved the rest of this town. So, and I know it's frustrating. Water damage is just almost as bad as fire damage. It closes them down for a while, but that structure's here. That history still stands. And and that's the importance of this kind of issue that we're talking about today. You've got to have the right people at the right time at the right place. Nobody ever wants to call 911 and have that phone not ring or not answer. Nobody wants to, at the moment someone's choking or dying or your town is on fire, to not have the best people and the best equipment show up. And so what I guess what I'm saying is what we're looking for is to be able to sustain that going forward. And I think honestly, and again, anybody, please come in, see me, call me. My answers aren't going to change, and I'll show you budgets. I'll show you anything you want to see.
I know you guys both have to go soon, so there was one last upcoming event I wanted to mention while you're still here, and that's surrounding the Heart of Holly that was preserved. And I don't say that to minimize the horrific loss that we went through, but we rebuild, and we will see those doors open again. So August 10th from 4 to 8 is Lakeside Park cleanup. There's no need to contact anyone, just show up to volunteer. So it's ready in time for the Hogs for Holly event, which is August 13th from 9 a.m. until midnight with concerts all day raising money for the employees displaced by the fire. Contact Daniel Prekup for questions about Hogs for Holly. You can find him on Facebook and register for the ride at hollyhistorical.com/hogs. They plan for the riders to pass the Hotel Moose and Andy's at 10:40 a.m.-ish. With the Chiefs up front. If you want to catch a video, Daniel asked me, Chief Narsh, they're leaving the middle school at 10:30, and can you get maybe some TV coverage for that? He thought you might have an idea about how to go about getting some video coverage of the ride from local news stations.
Well, they're already engaged, right?
I believe they are.
We've been on some of the news channels already, and certainly between the two of us, we've got contacts in the media, and we will be reaching out. Dan has done a phenomenal job. He asked me that question, and then the next day I saw Channel 4 news trucks, that he put together. So he's doing a better job with media relations than he thinks he is. You saw that little thing that he had put together about the fire. So he's doing a great job, and I think we probably will have some media coverage, and it's going to be a phenomenal day. I think it's really cool. We're passing by some of the other fire stations that supported us.
Oh, that's great.
And I think they're going to be out there probably saying hey. And so join us if you got a bike, if you got two wheels, or those three-wheel things, they call them motorcycles. But if two wheels plus one, if you'd like to join us, please do. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, he said there's going to be fire trucks that the kids can get in and ask firemen questions, bounce houses, 5 to 7 food trucks. Oakland Yard Athletics is running a cornhole tournament. Arsenal Harley Davidson, and I said, who is Arsenal Harley? And he said, that's formerly ABC Harley Davidson. I didn't know they had the name changed. They'll be at the bike registration offering free refreshments. There's cool prizes to be raffled, even a pair of tickets to see country star Justin Moore. And whoever wins gets to choose which show that they get to go see with him.
And then I have to do a shameless plug myself at this point. So the fire department, as of today, has T-shirts available with our logo on the front, and then on the back it has a picture of Battle Alley, and 100% of the profits go to those people that need it down, that were affected by the fire. So if you go on, really, there's many Facebook pages out there now where you can click and buy a T-shirt or a sweatshirt or whatever you'd like, and they ship them direct. We're going to try to have some there on the 13th event as well.
Wonderful.
And but we hate to stock up too many and have leftovers. So they made a deal with us that they'll ship them directly to people's homes.
Very cool. And we've got a bunch of charities listed in the announcement section of the Facebook Holly Open Discussion Forum. There's one for the Andes employees. The Moose just had a fundraiser for their employees at Backroads, and if you missed it, you can contact the Moose to donate. There's a link to the Patronicity site to help the Downtown Holly Rebuild and Preservation Fund. And then Hollyopoly. Do you guys have any info on that?
Just a little bit. I know that they're putting together a Monopoly style board, and the best spots are taken now. But the fire department is in today as
So this is to help move the historic train depot.
the train depot. Correct.
Okay.
So there's kind of a mix of fundraisers.
Okay, and we can contact the DDA director Nick Klemp at atnklempp@hollyvillage.org to
Correct.
sign up for that.
And
He'll
there's
appreciate that too.
And there's
Thank
no
you.
truth to the rumor that in Hollyopoly, if you have to go to jail, you end up in an actual cell.
You know, I don't
That's a
believe
rumor.
you.
That's a rumor.
Did the get out of jail free cards work for you, Chief?
Well, I think it is $200 to post bail, and all of that goes back to the.
Who's going to be our Monopoly guy in this one? Do we have someone out there that we're going to have like profile on the
You know,
chance
I don't
cards and
know.
the community chess ones?
I don't know.
That'd be fun.
We have one other huge event coming up, which is the Vietnam Moving Wall. That's going to be in Holly from the 4th to the 7th. The 7th is the closing ceremony. There's going to be volunteer counselors. I'll be one of them there. We're expecting thousands of people, I'm hearing. Is that
That's
true?
what we've heard.
I heard numbers from 10,000 to 30,000. Is that
We've heard the same.
We've
Okay.
heard the same. And just a cool fact for timing: if anybody wants to come out, and because a lot of people do, if you see a veteran funeral and people are aware of that, we had that unknown soldier that was finally identified from the Korean War last winter, and we escorted him out. People will come out on the side of the road. Well, August 4th at about 9:30, we're coming in with that wall. And it's going to have a police escort coming in. It's hopefully going to pass under a flag if we can get the truck back because it's in service, right? And where else is that truck? But line the streets. I think that would, if you're a veteran, I'm sure a lot of veterans would want to know. And we're going to be coming right down Saginaw, so into town. And so join us out there and watch it arrive.
Yeah, this is to celebrate the men and women who were met with scorn and worse when they came home from service, and it's going to be deeply moving to a lot of people. We're a veteran-heavy town, and so it's expected to be well attended. I expect the traffic maybe to be an issue. Like, don't drive that day if you can help it.
No, I don't think it's going to be that bad.
don't
The
think
day the
so?
wall arrives, you mean?
Yeah, any of it, the 4th to the 7th.
This is a 24-hour operation, so people can come at all times of day. There's a computer station set up where you can type in a name, and it'll take you to it, show you which panel it's on, and but you think about it. There's 50,000+ Patriots names on that wall.
Okay.
So as it passes by, let's honor them.
If there's any questions about the Veterans Center, call Joe Mishler at 810-348-9960 if you have questions about the moving wall. My last announcement is 988 is the new 911 for mental health disorders. 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, available 24 hours in English and Spanish.
I'm going to throw one out there on the event side. I think I saw it on Facebook. The Moose has got something going on at Lakeside this week, if I'm correct. Is there no party there? Was I wrong?
You may be right. I know they're going to be there on the 13th with us.
Oh, is it? Okay.
But I heard talking as I walked in, so that is very possible.
Now, we've got a few other events that I saw here for the Legion. We've got, of course, our 2 monthly events, and then we've got some things going on at the V.F.W. as well. We had, and let me just pull it back up, they're going to be doing a brunch, it looks like, and this is going to be a Saturday brunch that'll be at the V.F.W. This will be August 6th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. They're going to be doing this for the Traveling Wall as well in support of that. Cost will be $10 for adults, $7 for kids, 7 to 18, and free for kids under 7.
Here's the Holly Moose event, July 31st from noon to 6. They might be closed, but they're having a Holly Moose Lodge family picnic, and that's at Lakeside.
Outstanding. I think I'll be there
Awesome.
for that.
There we go.
Anybody got anything else they want to add?
Just that, please, call Chief McGee, call me if you're a resident out there. I know there's a lot of stuff. Facebook is just, it can take off, and I understand it, I get it. But at the same time, if you really want to know the truth, because we're going to give you the truth, give us a call. We'll answer any questions that you have. And on my side of the house, I invite you to come out. If you want to see what we have, I'll take you on a tour. There's no Taj Mahal in Holly. And we'd like to show you what our needs are, and we'll go from there. So we're
Now,
available.
you gentlemen have something else planned for tomorrow, is that correct? For reaching out to the community in some regard? I heard something, some rumblings about Facebook Live.
Facebook Live, 9 a.m., coming from
Fire
Holly
station,
Department.
right?
Ooh,
Yes.
Holly Fire Station.
I will be interviewing the chiefs 9 a.m. in the morning. So if anyone hears this tonight and you think of some follow-up questions to go along with what we asked about the special assessment today, you can join us on Facebook Live and ask those questions there. You can submit them right now in a comment section on the Facebook page, or you can email Chief Narsh if you'd like to submit your question anonymously at
chief@hollypolice.com. And thank you for everybody that listened
Yeah, this is awesome.
and commented. Thank you so much. We wanted this opportunity, and we're scrambling.
Thank you, Rodney, April, the Chiefs.
Yep. Thank you, guys.
Well, once again, it's been awesome. This has been the 1MC, Holly's very own community podcast, broadcasting from the American Legion in the bunker. We'll be coming back to you as soon as we can, once we've got more topics to discuss. If you've got anything you want to throw out there, again, this is your podcast. Reach out to us direct at 1MC@VFW5587.org. That's the number, or the number one, the letters MC at VFW5587.org. Thanks for listening, guys. Tune in next time.
Thanks for making the time for that today. I think the more information we get out there, the more we can
Thank you.